What is good, YouTube? It's Kyle from HospitalityMD coming at you with another episode of our podcast. Today, we have a great episode with David Mignano. He is the host of Be My Guest podcast and segment producer for the number one show in hospitality, besides Hospitality MD, No Vacancy Live, with Glenn Hausman and Anthony Melchiori. So check out both of those shows if you haven't already. But before we get started, please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you are not subscribed already, and turn on bell notifications along with liking this video. This helps YouTube show our content to more people so we can spread the good word of hospitality and contribute to the recovery of this beloved industry. So thank you for doing that in advance. Now, for today's episode, we're going to be dissecting David's hospitality story, starting out his experience as a part-time night auditor at a extended stay suburban property, all the way up to his management experience in a big box airport hotel. You do not want to miss this episode. We are going to be talking about the stigmatization surrounding making the switch from select service, economy, extended stay to full service, luxury, and big box, what you can do to prepare yourself, how you can stand out, and kind of talk through those nuances a little bit. We'll also be giving practical commentary on how one guest experience, which would be 5-star service, could also be 1-star service to the same guest, even if it's the same interaction. So tune in to learn more about that and enjoy today's episode. David, welcome to Hospitality MD. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, Kyle, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
It's my absolute pleasure. Now, for everybody tuning in, I want to give a little context for how David and I met, and I think it highlights a little bit of what we've been talking about more recently on Hospitality MD. Is I've talked a lot about these Facebook groups with hotel professionals. There's several of them that are out there, and I think, and again, I've said it before, but if you're not a member of these groups and you are in the hospitality industry, you're actually making a mistake by not joining, in my opinion, at least, because you can gain valuable insight and keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the hotel industry in areas, markets, segments, types of properties that you're not familiar with. And I'm sure for you, David, as is for me, like you're from an urban area in New Jersey, right? As I'm from Chicago. So to know what a shuttle driver in, Bella Vista, Arkansas is doing today is something that I've never had the opportunity to experience up until now. So I definitely see the value in them. And that's actually how you and I met.
Yep.
So I was actually looking for doing some research about people who have hired hotel consultants to try and get some, kind of market insights for Hospitality MD. And David was nice enough to show me some hospitality and reach out. And since then, we've been connected on LinkedIn, and I found out that he actually is producing podcasts for Anthony Melchiori and Glenn Hausman with No Vacancy Live, which is a podcast that I frequent. So it was kind of cool. I felt like I knew him before. I always heard the name. Glenn would be like, "Oh, David, can you pull that up?" Or "David, pull him out of the show," or something like that. And I'm like, okay. So then it was nice to put a face to the name. So with that being said, again, we're glad to have you on the show.
I'm glad to be here, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So let's start. I try and ask every guest this, and sometimes I forget if I don't ask it right away because we get so into the conversation. But do you remember the first moment that you felt hospitality, whether that was in the industry or as a child, you experienced it or something? Dig deep if you can remember.
Yes, and I would say that I didn't know it at the time. So when I was younger, I played a lot of sports, especially baseball, and we had a traveling team that would go to different states along the East Coast. So we would stay in hotels a lot. And I loved those trips. I loved being in hotels. I loved just being in that space. And I couldn't even put a finger on why. It was just, I loved it. And I wouldn't say that I knew at that moment that I was going to love to be in hospitality for a business, for a profession, because I didn't. I wanted to be in broadcast journalism. But when things weren't working out and I got into hospitality more out of necessity, I really instantly fell in love, because when I would walk into a hotel, it snapped me right back to that feeling of when I was a child, in the corridors, in the rooms. This really just this pristine, special environment that should be getting delivered to every guest. It snapped me back into that. And I was kind of like, wow, I didn't even realize how much I loved it when I was a kid, but I love it now. And I get that same youth feeling just every time I walk in the door, whether it be a small hotel or this big luxury box in Manhattan. It's the same feeling for me.
I got chills, David. I got chills actually. And it's I share a very similar sentiment myself. Having grown up with my mom being a flight attendant and traveling to hotels, and there's a magical, intangible, romantic feeling that you get when you walk inside, even if it's a La Quinta Inn and Suites in the middle of nowhere. It's still a hotel, and that's all that matters. And it seems like you certainly share that sentiment. Now, it's funny because you got this feeling, right? But it was something that was kind of fleeting. Maybe you never really, like you said, you never put your finger on what it was. You never explored that thought. It kind of just existed, and then it passed. And you grew up and played baseball, and you went to school for broadcast journalism. And when was it that you were reunited with the hotel? And when you were again, was it instantaneous, that memory being brought back to the front of your mind and that feeling coming back again?
I got back into hotels out of desperation. Just call it what it is. I graduated from school in 2010, so right out of the back of the '08 market, and due to certain circumstances, I couldn't really go to some of the more the entry level markets for radio and TV that probably would have had to go through, and I was never going to get a job straight out of school in Manhattan at that time, because the economy was so bad as it is. Radios and television stations were contracted, similar kind of to we're seeing to a degree now. But I was working at a job in Manhattan that I hated, and it was just a place I didn't want to be, and I had to get out. And I had a family member say, "Hey," and he worked in hotels, give hotels a shot. So one of the pieces of advice I was given was just get in any way you can. So I got in as a part-time night audit. And I'll be honest, even going in for the interviews, again, it goes back to that walking through the door. It's just something that clicks. I really can't even explain it, but it's just like, this is fresh. I love being here. I love being in a hotel for whatever reason. And yeah, I honestly could say, because again, part-time night audit, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I'm in a small 126 room hotel. I'm seeing maybe 4 or 5 people a night. It's a long shift because you're just really not doing much. And just being there kind of, again, brought me back to that feeling of, this is awesome. I really enjoy this. And as I kind of progressed through my career, and moved to the PM shift and continued to move up, it just kind of grew and grew and grew. But it never lost that feeling. It was really from the first day I walked in from the interview to even now, it's like, this feels home. This feels comfortable.
And I mean, I get it. I think with the sentiment, it's if you know, right?
Yeah.
Like for anybody who's listening, who is thinking to themselves, what the hell are these guys talking about right now? And I know there's people out there listening who are like, oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. And it's something that can it's tough to explain for sure. But that's beautiful, man, that you found your way back to a certain extent. And a lot of times, I actually recently read a book by David Brooks called Second Mountain. And one of the things he describes in Second Mountain is the enunciation moment, as he calls it, where
he described it as typically something happens to you as a child and you don't even really register or recognize it, but it enunciates in that moment that's unless you are doing that thing down the line, you'll eventually be resentful or unhappy or something. And that's what it is. There's that one moment of, certainly this is his opinion. I don't know if it's actually based in any science, but I believe that, and it's stuck with me. And I don't want to take anything away from your love and passion for broadcast journalism, because I think you and I relate a little bit as music and playing instruments was actually, I think, that analogous kind of passion that I had along the way, but hospitality was a thing that kind of overcame all of that. And it's great now because you get to combine your love for broadcast journalism more recently and your love for hospitality now. And I do want to talk to you about your show moving forward, but so you started out at a Candlewood, right? So a select service.
Actually, it's an extended stay. So okay. that's their lower tier extended stay product between Candlewood and Staybridge.
Gotcha. Okay. So that was your first kind of dipping your feet into actually behind the scenes working in hotels and smaller property. I'm sure it was a suburban area as well. But and for a lot of people, I think, they would have said, oh, well, if I'm not in a luxury hotel, if I'm not, at a big box, if I'm not in Manhattan, I'm not going to enjoy it because, I need more action, whatever. But even seeing 4 or 5 guests a night, was there something about the interactions, or was it the paperwork that you liked? What kept you in it? What was the hook within the job of being a part-time night auditor that kept you on?
Well, part-time night auditor for any job is certainly not easy.
It doesn't seem very glamorous to me, my friend.
It isn't in its own way. What I would say is as I developed this, or redeveloped, I would say, the passion for hotels. And let me step back for a second. Kyle and I are talking about this passion for hotels, and you kind of know it when you know it. And I walk in and I'm like, yes, I'm in a hotel. It does not mean that it's all floating on clouds just because we're in the building. I mean, the industry is very hard, and there are a lot of days that are just filled with, you can guess the word I'm going to put there, and sometimes there's days where you have to really push through, but it's that feeling, it's that underlying feeling that I think gets at least people like myself there. Back to your question just now, pushing through the night audit, it was really the desire to learn and grow. And it was the desire to get out of the part-time night audit, but I learned a lot in that position. Night audit, I think everybody coming to the industry should work night audit, because I learned how to, check off the books and close the accounts and start to really develop this better understanding of the overall operation than just checking somebody in, checking somebody out. I'd also say, listen, is working at the Candlewood Suites in Nanuet, New York, as glamorous as working at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan? No. I mean, the Plaza is the Plaza. I get it. I have always said, and I'll say it to the day that I die, that working at that Candlewood was the best start to my career I could have gotten. Because when you work in a smaller property like that, especially as an entry level, you are exposed to so many more things, so many different departments than you would normally in a bigger box hotel. When you're in a big full service hotel, you're very compartmentalized, right? There are so many people there to do their role. So front desk does front desk, housekeeping does housekeeping, accounting does accounting, sales does sales, revenue does revenue. But when I was in the Candlewood, especially when I got to the operations manager role, I'm breaking out the boards. I'm doing the taxes and the AP and AR. I'm working with our revenue manager on strategies. I'm helping our sales director reach out to clients and making sure that their clients are being taken care of in the property. So I was exposed from GM responsibilities to front desk responsibilities all on the same day. So I really got a crash course. Granted, not as a big of a box, but I got a crash course in the basics of every department. And I was responsible for touching every department. So if you're someone who really wants to get in the industry, I would absolutely say spend some time in a smaller type of hotel, select serve or extended stay, because you're going to touch so many departments and you're going to get a base knowledge of how all those roles work versus being compartmentalized into a specific role.
Right. And then you can start talking about, specialized roles, and then you add in the union situation when you're a lot of these urban big box branded properties, and then your role is even more specialized, stringent, etc.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that in mind, I'm sure you've probably heard this throughout your career. Maybe you're even guilty of yourself. I know I have been, and whether it's rightfully or wrongfully so, I would like to talk to you about it. But that is the stigmatization of select service and kind of lower tier economy brand hotel workers who are attempting to make that transition into a full service or larger box environment. Are you familiar with that? Have you experienced it? Have you heard it? Are you guilty of it? What's your perception on that?
I've 100% heard it. Listen, I mean, the fact of the matter is you're not going to go from 126 room Candlewood to the Marriott Marquis, which has 1,800 rooms in a similar position. The way I would break that or talk about that is it is a different animal. It truly is. A full service like the Marquis is a different animal than the Candlewood Suites. And honestly, if I had somehow gotten the role of from operations manager at the Candlewood Suites to say hotel manager, even director of say front office at the Marquis, I would have been swallowed up.
Yeah.
Right. I would have been. So there is some validity there. Where I would say is you have to look at your current role and say a smaller select service and try to correlate that to where it is in the big box. Right. So if you're a head of, let's say you're a GM of a small select service, say 120 room select service in a rural or suburban area, you will not get a GM job at a big box in the city. But could you get a hotel manager job? Maybe. Could you get a director level position of a department? Most likely. So you have to be open to take that step back or that 2 steps back to spring yourself forward if that's what you want to do. In my example, I went from the Candlewood Suites at 126 rooms to the Courtyard or the Crown Plaza Newark Airport, which is 258, I think it was, to the Marriott Newark Airport, which is 591. And I kind of stepped my way up.
So that was from, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but just so everybody can follow along. So that was from operations manager at 124 room extended stay economy brand to what position then?
To head of front office at the Crown Plaza to front office manager at the Marriott Newark Airport. So actually, in theory, I took a step back each move. I took a step back from number 2 in command at the Candlewood to running the front office of the Crown Plaza. I took a step back from the Crown Plaza to the Marriott Newark Airport because I was now the assistant front office manager. There was a front office manager above me. But each of those steps, I learned a lot. And if I'd gone from the Candlewood Suites to the Marriott Newark Airport, I would have been eaten alive.
Absolutely. And I love your advice to everybody. And I would probably maybe even take that a step further. And I don't want to discourage anybody, but if you're the general manager of let's say, a Staybridge Suites or a La Quinta or a Candlewood or a Comfort Inn Suites or something like that, and you want to go to one of the big boxes or one of the higher end properties, I think be prepared to be a front desk supervisor, be prepared to even maybe be a front desk agent in some cases, because I think a lot of the concern that comes with bringing people and the stigmatization, I think, is derived from I guess the consensus that there's a concern over, will you be able to handle the volume? Number
exactly.
one.
That's what it is. The
number
volume.
2, what bad habits may you have developed at these properties, or bad habits you could, depending on who you ask, that may be a hindrance in the level of service or the operations standards that are required to be at some of these bigger properties. Now, I will say, though, I think for some of the people that have made the transition who I've spoken to, most people actually find themselves, and I guess it's always different, but a lot of the people who made that transition have not regretted it despite taking the step back. Go ahead, David. I know you had a sentiment you wanted to share.
I was just going to say to kind of the part you're saying, the quote unquote bad habits, use that time in the smaller box to develop those good skills, right? Because you're right, 100%. I think a lot of that stigmatization comes from the volume, but hospitality is hospitality. Quality customer service skills are quality customer service skills. And just because you're in a small property, just because you're in a more rural area does not mean you should not be giving that 5-star service. And if you're developing those 5-star service skills at the smaller properties, they're very easy to transition to the bigger properties, especially as you're dealing with that volume, because it's not as one interaction per hour. It may be maybe 10 interactions per minute, which I've had experiences in at the airport properties.
And that's a beautifully articulated point. And I think it can be kind of broken down across multiple spectrums. Like, hospitality is hospitality. And I think, again, it's one of those things, if you know, hospitality is hospitality no matter what. And that could apply to the person from the Staybridge who wants to go to, the 3-star middle of the pack full service hotel. Or it could apply from that, person who's at the 3-star or 4-star who wants to make that transition to Four Seasons or wants to make that transition to luxury, because there's another set of stigmas in their positions that if you haven't worked in a Forbes 5-star and AAA 5-diamond property, then you're not qualified. And granted, that's not always the case, but it's certainly something that's been, discussed in terms of that. But if hospitality is about making people feel welcome and safe and make them feel good. So in theory, it shouldn't matter how you do that or in what setting you do that, because the hospitality would be transcendental.
Yeah. I mean, right now, listen, again, if you're at a smaller property, and again, if you have less volume, this is the time to really hone those skills, because you can take the extra moment to work with that guest or to develop that relationship with that guest. I mean, again, I look back at the Marriott Newark Airport where we're dropping sometimes 500 arrivals a day, and 300 of those arrivals are probably coming within the hours of 4 to 7. So we're doing a lot of volume, and it becomes a little more difficult to give that great customer service per se when you're pumping out things like this. But if you've worked on figuring out how to do that prior, right, and developing those skills, then it just becomes like second nature. So use that time. Don't say, oh, I'm sitting here in a rural area, I'm just going to quote unquote half-ass it. No. This is the time to really step up your game and develop all of those skills.
So what would be like an actionable takeaway that you might recommend for somebody right now somebody's listening to this right now who's on their night audit shift board, right? And they're at that select service or that economy brand hotel, and they've been, toiling with the fact that I want to do something, I want to elevate. What would you say? Do you have any advice for that person?
I would say, listen, if every interaction you have, whether it's someone asking for towels, whether it's someone checking in or checking out, whether it's someone just looking for a wake-up call, give the service that you would expect from that yourself to get. Think about how you would want to be treated when you're going to a hotel. I would say even give that service times 2. Take it a step above that. But let's just say you're not seeing anybody. A lot of these, especially if you're on work for a branded hotel, a lot of these branded hotels have these online training courses, e-learning. Marriott has Merlin. IHG has Merlin. But there's these different e-learning courses. Take those courses, right? If you have an idea of where you want to go, start taking those courses. If you don't have a clue where you want to go in the industry, which I think many people do feel when they first get in, take several courses. Take a housekeeping course, take a front desk course, take a revenue management course, take a sales course. Use this time to continue to develop yourself and your professional skills. And then every interaction, use that to develop your interpersonal skills. Again, by just thinking, how would I want to be treated? and then enhance on top of that.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. Great advice in terms of because most people are going to be at a branded hotel and they're going to have access to some type of brand support learning. And I think it's, people always say, especially like for people who are entering college for the first time, or even in high school, what classes do I take? What's my major going to be? And what's the advice that you always get? Well, why don't you take an engineering intro to engineering and a science course and this and that, and then maybe you'll find something that you like. And I think if you know that, like, yeah, I like hotels, right? Hotels are cool. I feel it, but I just don't feel quite comfortable. I don't feel like I've settled into my groove. I'm not where I want to be. Sample. I love your point there. Sample. I would also maybe add, if you're at a non-union property and you have the opportunity to cross-train, ask, utilize the people to your right and to the left of you. Also, if you're listening to this podcast right now, you are already doing something that a lot of people aren't doing to supplement their learning, hear from different perspectives, because it's a beautiful thing that I in Chicago can be talking to David in New Jersey right now, and we can be sharing our mutual experiences and friendship over the subject of hospitality, which I think is hugely important. So it's, there's different means of content for different facets of the industry, whereas Hospitality MD and David's show, Be My Guest, are very much focused on the personal stories, are focused on people's, enunciation moments and how they, started and how they've grown. No Vacancy, for example, is very much focused on the technical. They'll have VPs from companies talking about trends and industry relations and things of that nature. There's always something out there for you to consume in terms of content or learning that can help you. Now, with that being said, David, why don't you take us through your career a little bit more? I want to find out more about what you learned, kind of going from, let's start from the Crown to the airport property. You took a step back from there. What was the big shock for you when you got to that big box, high volume airport property?
You just said it right there, the volume. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, we would have sometimes double the arrivals of the entire capacity of the Crown Plaza,
Mm-hmm.
And we're 591 in terms of rooms. We're 30, I think it's like 30 some odd thousand square feet of banquet space. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember the exact number, but we're also a hotel that was running, I think, for the year, like 93% occupancy. And we were turning over like 86, 87% of the house each day. And then again, we're right on the airport property. So we're the only hotel that's on the airport property. And sorry if you guys hear my 2-year-old screaming in the background. This is the perils of
A-okay.
The perils of the home life, but
that's awesome.
But not only are we getting high occupancies, we're also getting people that are traveling through Newark that are high level within their field. So we're not getting usually the random leisure traveler, because our rates are like $300-$400 a night. We're getting CEOs on expense accounts. We're getting a little more affluent family leisure travelers. We're getting celebrities. We're getting a lot of pretty much anybody from the higher level of I don't know how you say it, but the higher financial level that can afford to stay with us is staying with us because of our convenience. So the expectations are up there. I mean, they're up there. People aren't going to come in for a 6-hour stay, paying $400 a night for that 6 hours, and not expect quality service. And that was probably the most difficult thing I had originally, was transitioning what we just talked about, that high quality service in that really rapid environment. And how do you give a 5-star service to everybody where you're just getting overwhelmed, you're getting crushed by people? And I think the thing that I learned the most from there is really being able to quickly read each interaction. And this is something that I started to train my team on once I got better at this, is if someone comes in, if a person comes in and he has his ID and his credit card out, and he hands them to you before he even says his name, you can probably bet this is a business traveler who's either been here many times or at least travels a lot, and just wants to get his key and go. He's not really interested in banter and full conversation. And right behind him, he may have a family of 4 come in that want to discuss where we are. We're going to New York City tomorrow. What can we do? How can we get there? Really excited. Let's make it exciting for them. Like, hey, welcome to Manhattan. No, we're not in Manhattan, but we're a 20-minute train ride away. So being able to diversify and identify those different interaction points was, I think, the biggest thing that I learned from there in that rapid environment.
That's a really interesting and valuable point. The Park Hyatt, the brand, they have their saying, which is luxury is personal. So like the 5-star service that you mentioned at the beginning, on paper, is when that guy just hands you his credit card and ID, and you just, kind of just as quickly and efficiently as possible with the bare minimum, pizzazz, if you will, give him his transactional interaction. That's 5-star service for that guy.
Absolutely.
People sometimes struggle with like, there's no, you don't have to take anything away from that interaction because it was actually what the guest wanted.
And I'm gonna go a one step further. If you gave the stereotypical 5-star service to that guest, it would have been a 1-star for him. So I've seen it. That review will come back with a 1. Even though even though the agent, the front desk person gave this great, warm, welcoming welcome, that individual had no interest in that. So you have to be able to read the situation. And to your point, 5-star service takes many, many forms.
I think that's where, and I've seen, as have you, where very talented people have been caught up with that because they just are unable to pivot, or they can't seem to comprehend how it may just not be appealing to somebody. I'm interested. I think you and Greg, actually, my co-host, have a very similar experience. Greg worked at the Hilton O'Hare Airport, which is on the tarmac, 860 rooms. And I can only imagine would be experiencing very similar volumes. And one thing that he always goes back to when we talk about his experience there is you also have a lot of people who just don't want to be at the hotel at all. There's so many people. How do you manage that part of it?
I think it comes back to just understanding their needs and trying to anticipate their needs. I mean, Greg, I'm sure you can give several examples of when you've come in at 2:00 and you've been at 60%, and by 7:00 you're at 105 because 6 flights got canceled. And listen, traveling is not easy, right? We are typically either the first destination for them getting ready to go into quote unquote battle at the airport, or they just came out of that struggle and they're staying with us. And moods typically are not great, especially from kind of the hardened traveler. So again, it's anticipating those needs. If a guest comes in, let's just say a guest comes in and says, here's my credit card and my ID. What time does your restaurant close? Well, I could easily just start checking him in and say it closes at 10 and just keep doing my spiel. Or I can say, hey, it closes at 10. What time do you anticipate coming down? Because it can get busy there. Let me make sure that I get you a seat. Or, we have maybe some light recommendations. All this while you're doing your work, right? You're not stopping the conversation. You're not stopping what you're doing. You're still working fast and still getting them out on time. But it's just approaching that and enhancing that conversation a little more. And that may step them up a little bit more. Yeah,
without a doubt. And instead of burying yourself into the computer screen, which I think a lot of people are, it's tough, right? To be able to have that ID and you're collecting registration information and you're trying to collect payment complete an accurate transaction with a large sum of money. There's a lot of concentration that goes into doing that. And the tough part is also being able to not make it seem like you're ignoring anybody, regardless of how they may be feeling or what level of service or interaction that they might be kind of desiring at the moment.
What I would say really is a big deal, if you can, and not every hotel can do this, but if you can, get out from behind the desk. That, again, people, especially people that travel a lot, it becomes a very transactional approach, and that desk becomes a barrier. There's like that invisible wall, your side, my side. And this was not my idea, so I can't take credit, but I've seen it work when implemented properly, where we would have our front desk agents, if there was nobody, if they weren't checking anybody in, they were in the lobby. They weren't behind the desk waiting for someone. They were out in the lobby actively engaging in people that were walking in, walking out. Guest walks in with their luggage. We're all there waiting, and you would get it would almost like shock them a little bit, and they'd be like, "Whoa, didn't expect this. This is awesome." And then you're walking them to the desk, and you're saying, "Hey, how was your flight?" And it's almost kind of breaks that mold already. And I've seen where that interaction changes like that.
It's like it gives the impression of like, oh, we've been expecting you. Yeah, exactly. Why don't you follow me? Let's just go. We'll just go check you in real quick. Like, not just follow me. Come on, let's go to the desk. We're gonna walk there together. Instead of, me as the clerk behind the desk being that obstacle that you have to overcome in order to get what you want, whether that's transactional or whether that's, traditionally classified 5-star services. We're on the same side. Let's go, whatever you want. We'll figure it out. Let's just walk over to the desk and do it. And that is beautiful. That is hospitality right there. That's not customer service. That's certainly a level of sophisticated hospitality.
And what did you change? You didn't change much. You're standing this part of the lobby or that part of the lobby. So the job description didn't get any harder. You don't have to provide anything additional of just where you stand. And it makes that much of a difference. And again, I've seen it.
Right. Instead of scrolling on social media during your downtime, you can get out behind the desk and go into the lobby. Do you miss being in a hotel every day? I know when you departed most recently, you were in a revenue management position.
Yeah.
But you were still at the hotel, right? I
was still on property. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how is that for you?
I do miss it. I miss a lot of the hustle and bustle. I miss the interactions with guests. Again, not every guest has been easy, of course, but I've been able to develop a lot of nice relationships with people that either they're repeat guests or one-off guests. And I did drive a lot of my fulfillment out of being able to make their stay that much better, as corny as that may sound. So I do miss the interactions with my team. I do miss the interactions with guests. I definitely miss that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are feeling that, as am I, for sure. I miss, especially if we want to take it a little bit full circle and go back to that enunciation moment, when you walk through the door and you feel at home. There's just some indescribable, inexplicable feeling of walking into a hotel. I mean, it's been a couple months, right, since you've probably been able to feel that, and I'm sure you miss it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've traveled here and there, far and few between, and it's great to be back there, but it sucks to see the state of each hotel. It's just to see the emptiness. There's usually a lot more liveliness. And I think that's one thing that really draws me to, is that liveliness. And that's missing, unfortunately, right now.
In most places, I think there are some places doing it right. But I think a widespread, right, as a generalized statement, I think, it's definitely depressing, to say the least, when you walk into the lobby of a lot of hotels nowadays. Now, would it be safe to say that because you just started Be My Guest, right? This is, you have released at this point in time on December 11th, 4 episodes, right?
4 episodes, yep.
Well, first of all, on behalf of HospitalityMD, congratulations. I love what you're doing, man. Like I said, I think you're a natural at interviewing people, and it's really a great, like, apex and that cross intersection between broadcast journalism and communications that you have been passionate about, as well as hospitality. And it's great to see you putting yourself out there like that. Would you say that this has been an opportunity for you to kind of maybe fill that void? Because you had mentioned, when I said, what do you miss about hotels? You said, well, it's just the interactions. I miss talking to the team. I miss talking to the guests. Has this been a remedy for that for you at all?
In a way, In a way, for sure. I mean, a lot of the inspiration for Be My Guest came from working with Anthony and Glenn on No Vacancy. It came from seeing Hospitality MD and seeing a lot of the cool stuff that you guys were doing that really combined both of the passions that I did have. And that's why I got involved with Glenn in the first place back in the end of 2018, was seeing him combine those two loves of mine. As far as Be My Guest, a large part of it was driven, interacting for myself, but also trying to continue to help heal the industry. And a lot of the stuff that we're going through as hospitality people can feel very isolating. You feel very alone because you think you're the only one. You're not the only one going through it, but your individual story, it can feel potentially very isolating. And what I'm trying to do is get inside the minds of people in the industry that are dealing with a lot of the same things at the surface level and drilling down underneath so that someone that hears it may say, oh man, they feel the same way I do. That makes a lot of sense. And then, oh, wow, that's how they're handling it. Maybe I can try that. That makes a lot of sense too. And it's really just trying to build off of that sense of community that you have started and that Glenn and Anthony have started and those Facebook groups have started. You're talking about those groups at the top of the show. The hospitality family group, the one that's 58,000 or whatever it is now, people strong. I mean, the sense of camaraderie in that group is like no other. And I've spoken several times to Sarissa, who's one of the founders of that company that group about how this whole thing started. And it was really kind of like hospitality in general. It was on a whim. And it's grown into this really unique space for hospitality people. And that's where, Be My Guest became, I guess, like I said, an inspiration as I'm trying to create a similar story or a similar platform, but in a virtual or a video or audio space, so that people can be spoken to, not directly, but it's much more interpersonal when you're seeing someone speaking to their true stories that you can't get out in a one post or two posts.
Right. And I can honestly say, and for anybody listening to Hospitality MD right now who has not heard of or has not checked out Be My Guest, I can honestly say that in me consuming Be My Guest, I found myself emoting. I found myself physically smiling, chuckling, laughing, feeling like a third person in the conversation, which is a testament to you already having achieved what you set out to do, in my opinion, which is to unite the industry. Because there's one thing for somebody to be able to post something or what you're seeing a lot right now is, I finally started my job at a nursing home after being furloughed or laid off for 8 months, or just got a call back hoping that this job interview goes through. That's great. And you get support from people in that. But when was the last time that the doorman who got laid off after working there for 30 years and that being the only job he's ever known, when was the last time somebody sat down with him and actually said, hey, why don't you tell me your story? And why don't you actually, let's get vulnerable. Let's actually talk about this. And you are going to use that to help others. And I think that's taking that intimacy and community to heights that are certainly needed, especially as we transcend the 9 and now going into 10-month mark of this crisis. I think is just beyond important. Do you feel like you've already brought value to the community, or how are you feeling right now after episode 4?
Feeling really good that it's serving its purpose. I've gotten a lot of great feedback, and thank you for your kind words as well. But
Sure.
I've gotten a lot of great feedback from people that I've never known, right? Never interacted with before, that have come across it for whatever reason, the connections on LinkedIn or Facebook and stuff. People have already told me that it's helped them a lot. And I think even better is that people want to come on. And episode 4 is the one that's been most recently posted, but I actually have 11 episodes already recorded. A good amount of them, and I have several more coming up next week, a good amount of them, people that have reached out to me through the hospitality family group that have seen the videos and said, hey, I want to tell my story. And the reason that it works, the reason that the show has worked to the point that it has, it's really nothing to do with me. It's that every guest I've had to this point has really been open and honest and transparent with their story. They haven't held anything back, or if they have held anything back, it hasn't been noticed. They really are allowing themselves to be vulnerable in front of me, technically, but in front of the audience. And I think that's what makes it work. So this is real. These are real people with real feelings, and they're exposing those feelings to the world. And in the common mindset of what you just said, the common goal of hoping that it helps somebody else relate to what their story is and help someone else to say, hey, I'm not alone. And that's what makes the show work. It's very little to do with me, and pretty much everything to do with my guests have been that allowing to be vulnerable.
And I will say, because the first thing, that when we first met, you didn't have Be My Guest, and and then to see that you had started it. Number one, I already was like, oh, David's like a solid guy from what I can tell. Like, I'm super happy for him. But then I actually read more, and I realized that, for you to say there's no barrier to entry. You don't have to be a C-suite executive. You don't have to be, a general manager. You don't have to be anybody. You can be what the entire world would consider to be a nobody, and you can still tell your story, and you're still worth something. Your story is still helpful. Your story is still valid. And I really resonated with that. It aligns with Hospitality MD. It aligns with myself. And to me, I just feel like if you keep doing that, like if you don't lose sight of that, which I don't think you will, it's going to just help so many people. So I have to thank you for your contributions to hospitality, because it's so difficult for people to put themselves out there on a platform like that, and to be able to kind of just come out and say, hey, I'm trying something new. I'm doing something different, especially in the midst of all this uncertainty. And it's a great feeling. So I do want to thank you on behalf of the hospitality community for your sincere contributions, truly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And hopefully a lot more good work to come out of it.
Absolutely, my friend. So I guess we're pretty much at the end here. I guess the last thing that that I want to ask you is if you have a message or anything that you would want to share with with the hospitality community at scale, and with the Hospitality MD audience specifically. What would you want to say?
Kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, is just use this time as an opportunity to reset, especially in hotels. And this is something I talk about in my podcast a lot, is we get caught up in the day-to-day, because it is a lot of hours. It is a lot of hard work. And sometimes days can kind of slip away. So using this time to reset, reestablish, or reevaluate where you are in your life, reevaluate where you are within the industry. And if you're not happy with it, this is a great time to make a change. If you're someone who has always worked in front desk or always worked in housekeeping, but you want to maybe move up to that generalized position of a general manager or an AGM, use this time to maybe take that step back in a different department. Go get some F&B experience. Or if you're F&B, go get the front desk experience if you can. Go get the housekeeping experience if you can. But just do whatever you can to try and continue to grow through this. Watch Hospitality MD. Definitely check out No Vacancy Lab with Anthony and Glenn, because as you said before, we're talking to so many great people, so many great minds in the industry. I learned, this is going to sound like a shameless plug, but I learn so much every day by just sitting behind the scenes and listening to the stories and what goes through the minds of all these C-level executives, and what goes through the mind of Anthony and Glenn. I plan on taking a lot of that information back to work with me. I've learned so much about the financial side, loan structures, all these different things. Check that show out. There's so many opportunities for education, whether it be a certificate program. FAU has a great program. Cornell, obviously. Yes, I get finances are very tight. Check out the FAU program. I think it's very cheap right now because of a lot of donations. Just Google stuff. talk to people, get in those hospitality family groups and just
Right.
talk to people, read their stories, read what they post, learn from them. There's the access to knowledge is limitless right now. So as best as you can, keep pushing yourself forward, keep trying to grow, whatever it is you want to grow in. That would probably be the number one thing I want people to take away from everything going on right now.
That's a great sentiment. And real quick, I do want to say, I think the episode you were referring to with no vacancy, I think it was somebody with CBRE or something like that, and he was talking about what can, I think his name was Donald or something. I would have to double check on that.
You're thinking of Dr. Donald Wise, the Dr. Donald Wise episode where he
absolutely. So I listened to that episode, and and I heard him talking about mezzanine loans and all these things, and I was like, I thought to myself, wow, like it took me longer than the episode to get through it, because during the episode I was actually pausing and going to like Google and saying, okay, What is the mezzanine loan? What is, and it's actually, you can interact with this content deeper than just having it playing in the background as you're doing something. Like this can actually be something where you sit down with nothing but your phone in your hand, you listen to it. Okay. Again, like the mezzanine loan thing, which, I'm thinking, okay, boom, boom, let me see what that is and go from there. And actually that episode, I was like, wow, I know nothing about the asset management and real estate side. So I decided I just signed up for the Cornell course, which covers that, the certificate program. So yeah, there's definitely, in whichever content you're consuming, whether it's Be My Guest, Hospitality MD, Christine Trippi with the Wise Pineapple, the Room Block
Love Christine.
podcast
Love Christine.
Yep.
Love Christine. Shout out.
You know what?
Christine.
You got to get her on the show. On Be My Guest.
We're ready on that. We're
Nice.
ready. We're ready. Just getting the schedule figured out. But yeah, Christine is awesome. I mean, listen, consume all of it.
Right.
Try all of it. Listen, I'll be the first one to sit here and say, listen, Be My Guest may not be your cup of tea. So give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, that's fine. Go to Hospitality MD. Go to No Vacancy. Go to Christine. Consume them all, because you're going to get so many different perspectives from so many different places. It's only going to make you better. It's only going to make you a more well-rounded person coming out of this. So consume all this content that's getting put out there from these really great people. It's only going to be for the betterment, and it's all free. It's all free.
Right. There's nothing stopping. Right. At this point, there's no, you really do have to take a little bit of a sense of a personal accountability, because especially right now, as we talk about, what's the state of the job market, we already know that it's so tough. But if you go in there and you say, yeah, I've been, every day, Anthony and Glenn go live at, at 11 a.m. or at noon, and I go in and I check that out. And then afterward, I listen to Hospitality MD. And then on the weekends, I listen to Christine Trippi. And then I listen to Be My Guest. And you're doing all this stuff. People are going to say, you know what? You actually care. You're serious. It's a personal brand that you can achieve just by consuming content. But we could definitely, certainly talk about this. And I look forward to seeing more of what you do, looking forward to seeing your future interviews. But most importantly, for the Hospitality MD audience who is thinking to themselves, wow, Be My Guest sounds great, I want to check that out too. Tell our listeners how they can find you, how they can listen or watch Be My Guest, and what if they want to share their story as well? How can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, like as was said before, the show is open to anybody. I don't care where you work, and I don't care if you're front desk agent. I don't care if you're a CEO. I don't care if you work in restaurants, bars, cruises, carnivals, airlines. Doesn't matter. It's open to anybody within hospitality, travel agencies. Easiest way probably is just to search me up on LinkedIn. So David Mignano, Mignano. Connect with me there. I post them every Tuesday about 10 a.m. They are also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all the typical podcast places. Just search Be My Guest. There are several different Be My Guest episodes. In fact, I think in Apple Podcast, I'm Be My Guest 1. So just check out Be My Guest 1. But I would say the easiest way right now is just connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you want to be a guest, absolutely reach out to me on LinkedIn. Reach out to Kyle, who'll connect you with me. I'm open to talking to anybody.
Absolutely. Thank you. And for everybody listening, we will be including the links to David's LinkedIn. We'll be including the podcast and YouTube links in the show notes for today's episode. And certainly for those who are struggling to put themselves out there, another thing actually on the topic of the job market, if you're furloughed, laid off, looking for a job, to be able to say, yeah, I was a guest on Be My Guest podcast where I shared my story with the hospitality community. And likewise with Hospitality MD, you know, we say it all the time, we don't have any barriers to entry either. So you're always welcome to whoever you go to, whether it's both or one, you can contribute something, and the opportunities is now to contribute. So with that being said, again, David, I thank you for your contributions to hospitality. I thank you for being on Hospitality MD. Truly my pleasure to host you today.
My pleasure to be on, and thank you guys for being really one of the leaders that's paved the way for Be My Guest. You know, when this whole thing started, there really weren't too many people out there doing this, you being one of them. And it's definitely been an inspiration for me to start Be My Guest. So thank you.
That means a lot to hear that.
Hey guys, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. Hope you guys find a lot of value out of that. Be sure to check out David's project, Be My Guest. Be sure to check out No Vacancy Live, where he also produces for. And be sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We appreciate you guys. We love you guys, and we'll see you again with another video soon.